Okay, well, today my guest is Henk Lourens, and Henk. How do you like to be introduced? Let me ask you that first of all.
Well, Mark, I think for today, let's try the short one. I think my background is quite unusual compared to most analysts that you would interview. Most of these analysts, I think, started at the top of companies, or we call them parachutists. And I was fortunate enough to start working at the bottom. From my technical background, I worked with people on the front lines most of my management career.
You were on the shop floor.
I was on the shop floor a long period of time. So I saw things that puzzled me sometimes as much as it puzzled the workers there. And I was also fortunate enough to sit in the boardrooms and to see the disconnect.
Wow, okay.
And that, I think, has steered me into a direction that I think is quite different to what most people have had.
And I was very struck in a talk you were making once about levels of disengagement of employees in South Africa. Maybe just tell us a little bit about how that is, because it's quite stark.
Well, you probably don't need employee disengagement measurement to tell you that it's not great, but just for the facts of it is that the actual actively disengaged personnel actively disengaged, it's 45%. Now that's third last in the world, tied with Syria. And Syria, from what I can judge, is a pretty bad place right now. So, actively...
What do you mean by actively disengaged?
Actively disengaged is not your person that just sits at his desk and does nothing. This is the person looking around for opportunities to damage your business and to pull other people down. So if you look at Marikana, post office strike, how violent many of these strikes are, it's, I think, a good indication of exactly that. People actually hate being at work.
So it's quite remarkable, really. We don't, I think, realize how bad it is.
We don't.
How have things got this bad? I mean, it points to a crisis of leadership or something in our companies.
It certainly does. If you look at the questions that people are asked to determine their engagement, typical questions would be: I've got the tools to do my job. I know what's expected of me. I'm treated with respect. Somebody's taken an interest in my career and development. Somebody has given me praise in the last 6 months. So these are the real basic things that you need to be successful as a company. And it's very clear that if you're third from bottom, that these questions are answered in the negative.
Yes.
And very much so. Now this comes back to leadership without a doubt. And we possibly can discuss this in great detail, but a good definition of leadership I've seen once said that the art of leadership is to get people to want to do what's in the interest of the organization. And this is where we're failing, because first of all, we don't see what it is that's in the interest of the organization at the top.
Okay.
And if we don't see what it is that's in the interest, how can we engage people to do that?
Leaders have taken their eye off the ball in some ways in their businesses.
Yes, they have, and the sad reality is that they don't see it like that. Whether it's in America or here in South Africa, if you ask the leaders, they will tell you that the problems are with workers that are not skilled, the government legislation, the tax system, the unfair imports. And I'm now quoting from what the American managers are saying.
Yes.
You know that in South Africa, our managers say exactly the same.
Okay. Now, I sense from what I've heard you say before that you put it down to an issue around where the managers have their eyes off the ball. The leaders are focused very much on maximizing shareholder value.
Correct.
You've got a concern about shareholder value maximization.
Well, when shareholder value maximization was brought in, the idea, somebody once said, the problems of today are from the solutions of yesterday. So in the late 70s, what we had was that there was this problem, this agency problem. The fact that the managers did not have their interests aligned with the shareholders. So the solution was proposed that we should reward managers with shares and options and bonuses determined by certain measurements, how well they were doing. Now it turns out that these measurements are actually pushing managers into short-term thinking, not investing, and it's actually worse than that. It closes their way of thinking to the way that the world has really changed towards.
Because every 3 months the results have to be there.
Well, it has to be there. Not only that, what can't be measured is not getting done. So the focus has come totally onto the outcomes versus on the means. And in any kind of an interdependent system, if I ignore the means and start manipulating outcomes, the results are disastrous. And from the point of view of the employees working on the floor, seeing that something is wrong, they're not stupid. They know something is wrong. They can see that what they're asked to do by the measurements goes directly in opposed to what the customer needs. And that, if you can see, I mean, how can you be passionate when you see that you are doing things that make the customers unhappy?
So this has implications for how sustainable our businesses are.
Absolutely.
If the leaders are focused simply on short-term results to please the shareholder.
Absolutely. Now, I'll take a great example. I think Eskom is the classic example. I mean, we all know that Eskom for the last 10, 15 years, the managers have been gaining tremendous bonuses each year for a job well done, according to the metrics. But we also know that those metrics resulted in no money really being spent on maintenance and critical things. So the short term was taken care of very well. They were maximizing the wealth in the short term, but we know in the long term they got us to near disaster.
And what we need more than anything else is to be able to build sustainable businesses.
Exactly.
That employ people in the long term.
Exactly. And shareholder value maximization it forces management to think of small efficiency improvements, 5%, 10%. They will not go after the more risky effectiveness improvements, which can give them 30 and 40% because there's risk involved with it. And they've come to believe that it's not possible.
Okay. Well, I was going to ask why. I mean, it sounds so obvious in terms of what you say, the short-term perspective.
Yeah.
But people have lost the focus on that completely in terms of building a sustainable business.
Exactly. And when management stops believing that this can be done because the workers are terrible, the government is a problem, there are 50 reasons why they believe it can't be done. In this evolutionary landscape, the management consultants pick it up. So the McKinseys and the big organizations, they give management what they want. And what they want is the 5 and the 10%. So they will help them do that.
Yes.
And the much better improvements that are out there, which requires that management do self-inspection and ask themselves what is going wrong, what is our contribution. That is not getting onto the agenda. Okay,
so leaders have a responsibility, you're saying, to reflect on the contribution that they're making to building a sustainable business.
Exactly, but the sad reality is that everywhere in the world, and we've got classic examples from Professor Michael Porter in America, that's the last thing that they do. As long as there's leeway by firing, let's say, 30 or 40 or 50% of the workforce and keeping the wolf from the door, they will not self-examine. They will. It's much easier for all of us to put the blame somewhere else.
Okay, I can see that shareholders will be perhaps happy with getting the short-term results. If they don't get them, they can go somewhere else, or they've always got a choice in terms of where they invest their money.
Possibly, although the really smart shareholders and the institutional shareholders will, if you ask them, they would say that this is not what their interest is, this is not what they want. But if you ask management, they're convinced that that is the only interest.
Okay. Yeah. So if we think about managers and leaders in business today, what kind of leadership would you say is needed?
Well, Einstein said we cannot fix our problems at the level of thinking that caused it, and I think that is fundamental. So until management start to understand what the world has changed towards, because we've had with the advent of the internet and international competition, globalization, what we've had is that the level of competition has intensified. And if I may mention just very quickly, there's something called the Carnevin framework, which from Dave Snowden, which states that you can put the world, or the states of business, into 5 different domains. There's the simple, the complicated, complex, chaotic, and then disorder. Now, I just want to discuss 2, simple and complicated. And in simple, And this is where we were 50, 60, 70 years ago with Sloan and General Motors and the advent of DuPont, the advent of management. This was best practice. We all agreed on what we should do. Cause and effect was simple, linear. Nobody disagreed. So just be efficient. Measure all the parts, make sure they're efficient. The problem is then that around the late 90s with the Japanese competition, for instance, going to America, it changed towards complicated. Now you've got cause, time delay, and then a few months later an effect. It's not so clear. Now we do not have best practice. We disagree. We cannot clearly measure these things. We can measure the overall system result, but measuring the parts and forcing the parts to be efficient make the system overall inefficient.
Okay, and we also live in a complex world, so
unpredictable. And the next step after that,
prices.
With the internet coming in, we've now even started taking some businesses out of the complicated, and they've now started moving into the complex, where nobody can foresee the cause and effect. So it makes it even more so. So in the simple, we had hierarchical control, and the boss could tell you what to do and do it very well. Then in complicated, we still need hierarchy, but we now need to horizontally coordinate. And that's a totally different mindset from what it was before. And when we get into complex, it gets worse, because the hierarchy now starts to get into the way. And you have to adjust. You still need hierarchy, but you have to adjust the way that you believe you should run.
Okay.
And then only, when the structure of the organization matches the competitive environment, only then can you have triple bottom line sustainability.
So, as I guess company leaders, corporate leaders need to be very aware of what kind of environment are they dealing with their business.
Absolutely, because what they typically do is, as the results, and we see this in mining, starts to get worse and worse, the knee-jerk reaction is to push it back into the simple, where we have more and more hierarchical control, where you force people more and more into a certain straitjacket, where the results actually doesn't get any better. And you actually you create disengagement in the workforce that way.
Right.
Okay. Yeah. Because they see there's no hope. You make them lose hope, because they can see that what you're forcing them to do is not going to work. They know it. They can't tell you that, but they know it. And you basically in the business then are forcing them out of hope. And an employee that's lost hope has a choice. He can leave if he's got the options, or he can become totally disengaged.
Yes, so we have these high levels of disengagement.
Yeah.
So, Henk, are you optimistic about the future? I mean, if we look 20 years down the road in businesses in South Africa, what do you sense?
Well, South Africa is a very, very tricky situation, because we've got so many unknowns, and we've got a political situation and a historical situation on top of everything else. And somebody once said to me, in South Africa is where the fault lines between West and East and Africa meet.
Oh, okay.
And I thought that was pretty good. So if we can get it right, the rest of the world will be the benefit for it. But it is an extreme here. And Schumpeter said that we have the free market that's superior to the planned economy because of the evolutionary process, creative destruction. If a business stops doing efficiently what the customer wants, they will fall by the wayside, and newer ones will come in the way. And the reality is that only about 30% of change efforts are successful. It's really, really hard for managers at the top to start questioning everything that made them successful in the past. And that's what they will have to do. Now here we've got an advantage in a way that the labor force do not enjoy the worst aspects of capitalism at all. And they will tell us very, very, very quickly that is not the way they're willing to be managed and to work. So I think in a way it can go either way. We could be the first to find these enlightened ways of management, not throwing away the hierarchy, but being able to pull in the workers and making them able to taste success, because that's what we have to do. And the other alternative is also true, because we don't have forever to do these kind of changes. Then on the other hand, we've got this automation that's coming through everywhere in the world.
Of course.
And I think whatever can be automated will, because it gives you a cost advantage and we compete with the rest of the world. And what I see very much changing, and actually some carnage coming along, is in the banks. Because if you look at companies like Alibaba and Amazon, actually, they have all the information around their customers in one central area together. They know what the customer is going to buy based on what he bought before. They're experts in this. Where the banks have got 6, 7 different fiefdoms or functional units, is maybe the polite word, and they don't share the information. They try and understand the customer, but there's no way that they can get close to understanding it the way these companies can. And I believe that Alibaba in China, 9 out of 10 people as you talk on the street already uses the banking service.
Millions of customers.
Close to 1 billion probably.
Yeah.
Millions of customers. So there's no doubt about it that the change is accelerating, and the old style of managing will not work. So it depends. Those companies that can adjust will do relatively well. Those that won't will die. And then you'll have some upstarts. I think of a Capitec Bank. Capitec is an upstart. And all these upstarts taking advantage of some see it as problems, others see it as opportunities.
Capitec bringing in millions of new customers when the other established banks are scrabbling for market share between them.
Exactly, really. And not just that, they were able to take and integrate their systems from the beginning. They don't have the problem of all these legacy systems being cobbled together. They took the system and they integrated it from the beginning. Which is, of course, if you think Capitec is an advantage, wait till Amazon or Alibaba tries its hand at that.
Yeah, because they will have the economies of scale.
Exactly.
Well, Henk, it's been very interesting. Thank you very much for your time. And look forward to engaging with you further in the future.
Thank you very much, Mark.
Thanks.
Thank you. I hope I stayed inside the picture all the time.